Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here at Far Eastern University, Manila Library. So I'm at the third floor. This is a Filipiniana section. So it's 5:10 here in Manila, June 2021, 2017. So I am prepared for this vlog. This is actually a book review titled Mirror Mirror by Simon Blackburn. So you might ask me, what type of book is this? So this is categorized as an extended essay. Uh, it is stated in the preface of, or in the introduction of the author. So first question is, how did he get an idea? So what inspired him to write this essay? Actually, it's just the advertisement of L'Oreal. The advertisement of L'Oreal, which tagline is because you're worth it. So because you're worth it was the stimulus that actually somehow motivated the author to write. So basically, the essay is about vanity or self-love. So in the teaser that I posted on my Facebook wall, there's a in this book, after the title page, there's a quotation by Shakespeare, and that this quotation somehow attracted a viewer named Meiling Balingkos. So this is actually perhaps the sonnet, Shakespeare sonnet that captured the attention of a viewer. That's why I'm doing this blog, to see whether she agrees or not with whatever I'll be critiquing here. So now, basically, the essay is this is just thoughts about vanity. But then, when I was reading the book, I discovered that this is not an easy read. I was supposed to review this last week. I thought I can read this in 1-2 days. But then, this was a very difficult read because Blackburn, I searched his biography, he is a philosopher. He was the author of Oxford Dictionary, Dictionary of Philosophy. And so I checked his biography. Of course, in De La Salle University, he has 5 books other than the Oxford Dictionary. And then I also learned that in my search online that Blackburn was a fellow and as well a professor in Cambridge University. And in fact, he's also affiliated with other universities. In this book, he was thanking professors or personnel from Princeton University. And so I really did prepare. I read some of the works of, I also did check some of the works of Blackburn. But then for now, let me just simplify. So since this is highly philosophical, we just have to simplify. I always believe in Occam's razor's philosophy. Occam's razor's philosophy is always use the minimalist approach. Simplify rather than complicate. Now, the good thing with Blackburn is that he is a reader-friendly type of writer. He uses sentences, clauses in a very simple way. His language could be considered as something that is practical. He is pragmatic and modern at the same time in his expressions, in his idiomatic expressions. And so it's not very difficult to deal with him. But then, quite intimidating because he was making citations now, as far as vanity. Basically, the thesis is simple, that vanity, there's beauty in vanity, and that it's human nature to have self-love. That is where the arguments would actually revolve. Now, okay, let us start with a citation made. He mentioned about Thomas Hobbes, somewhat an assertion, no, about how humans should view self-love or vanity. According to Thomas Hobbes, as cited by Blackburn, we need not look life in terms of finis ultimus. Finis ultimus in philosophy is utmost aim, or view life in summum bonum, or greatest good. This is actually from the old moral philosophers. So, now, why is this so? So, when you look at the finis ultimus or utmost aim for summum bonum, right? It seems like the moral philosophers, the old moral philosophers, would always think of an end. Okay? Think of an end rather than think of the process. They would always think of, moralize things for the greatest good. But then, according to Thomas Hobbes, you cannot live thinking of the common good, and yet your own desires are put last, and your imaginations at the strand. Right? So that's one. Next. Blackburn presented a lot of schools of thought. No? But then I will only highlight some of the very interesting ones, salient schools of thought regarding vanity. Now, let me start with Stoics, according to Kant. Now, Kant is a German philosopher. So, Kant would view Stoicism as something that can actually account for humans' perception about vanity. And of course, he's coming from a metaphysics of morals. So, according to Kant, always we need to somehow view life in terms of self-love, self-centeredness, self-desires, worldly desires, and that in order to suppress, actually there's such thing as suppression of emotions, that in order that there's morality, you will adhere to morality, you need to suppress the emotions within you. And that if you're able to suppress this, then you will be able to experience that joy or the nirvana within you, the bliss of finding joy within yourself. And whose basis of morality are we talking about? So, for Stoicism, God's view of the world, is actually the basis for morality. So morality, the basis for morality would be God's principles and laws. Right? Now, of course, these are categorical imperatives that you have to follow. So of course, most of the followers of this philosophy, even those who are practicing this, would somehow be saints, the purists, even the monks, were able to control, self-control, and not succumb to any temptation, not to succumb to over self-love, indulge in worldly pleasures. Now, but then, there's also downside to suppression of emotions. In terms of suppression of emotions, there were also cases for arguments. For example, now, talking about total suppression of desire, accordingly, restless desire prevents there being an endpoint. Now, talking about the endpoint, talking about finis ultimus or utmost aim, that restless desire, this desire, the emotion within, would somehow prevent prevent there being an endpoint. Like conversing, gardening, running, boxing, and pumping iron in the gym. Because living is a process, not a product. So viewing accordingly, viewing life as an end, living life for the common good, for idealism, and then not enjoying your life, not living your life, not imagining, suppressing, would somehow be not living life to the fullest, right? That's a basic maxim in philosophy, living life to the fullest. But for Kant psychology is to overcome, no? Kant psychology is actually to overcome emotions, desires by apathy. That is the proposal of Kant. Kant's proposal was then we should have apathy. Do not feel anything. But then there were so many criticism about this. How can you not feel? Since we were created like this, we feel. So hence the concept apathy. But then in his succeeding works, Metaphysics of Morals, it's not actually complete apathy. We're not talking about complete not feeling anything, but moral apathy. Moral apathy is the suppression of what is immoral to achieve total self-control, to experience that bliss or nirvana from within. There are some people who would find joy, the saints, Mother Teresa, they would find joy amid suffering. Even if they're suffering, they still experience that joy. But many people would question that. How can you experience joy when in fact you are suffering? Now, Langton stressed the risk of ordinary apathy. Talking about apathy, Langton stressed the risk. There's a danger to ordinary apathy. And for example, Langton pointed out a case who is a follower. This follower of Kant was Maria von Herbert. Maria von Herbert actually committed suicide. She was really trying to apply that suppression, categorical imperatives. So categorical imperatives would try to suppress emotions and then try to reach that nirvana point where you're experiencing joy even if you don't succumb to the worldly desires. But then Maria, unfortunately, lost a loved one, right? So she lost a loved one because of too much suppression. And so she committed suicide. That's a case in point. That, trying to be, as what author said, trying to be Iron Man, trying to be a saint, would be quite not healthy. That is what he is. The tone of his voice is like, if you will try to be Iron Man or saint, then there are consequences as well. Now, so, in fact, in page 9 of this book, somehow, I was observing whether was he supporting Vanity or was he not for Vanity? In page 9, somehow, he already revealed his side, that somehow he was inclined to say that Vanity is okay. It's natural. Because he said, we have Hume on our side. Right? So, if he was arguing, then he would say, we have Hume, another philosopher, on our side. In fact, Hume said that away with pretensions of deep contemplative inner peace. So according to Hume, these pretensions of inner peace, happiness within, this is actually a pride, a pride not of nature. If, for example, you reach that part where you are so righteous, I think this is what Hume is actually telling us. When we reach that part, when we are able to say no to these worldly desires, these emotions, self-love, when we reach a part where we feel that we are righteous, that we don't commit, we don't succumb to this anymore, we don't succumb to temptations and all, we don't succumb to self-love. So, what is this? According to you, this is pride rather than nature. So it's clear that in the arguments here, they're pointing out that vanity is nature. This is human nature. Then how can you oppose that natural tendency? Now, but then, according to Blackburn, there are also philosophers like Murdoch. Murdoch proposed a recipe, Murdoch's recipe for avoiding selfishness. So how do you do that? There's such thing as you need to avoid selfishness to achieve a kind of objective God's eye view of the world. So that is the proposal of Murdoch. So somehow Murdoch was inclined to also support Stoicism or Stoics' idea of categorical imperatives, because the morality, the basis for morality is God's principles, right? So whenever you talk about morality, ethics, always a principle would be pointing back to God, God's principle. But then, John Curry argues, look at the paintings of, for example, Greco, Rubens, Turner. Look at the poetry of Blake, Pope, Milton. All these things. How did they produce this? How did this artist produce such an art? Was it a product of that objectivity from God's view, or it came from their own imagination? Or the word is self-daydream. Is it coming from the objectivity or objective God's view, or does it come from the self-daydream? Right? So this is a bit long. So I'll just have to cut this. So this is my part 1. Then I'll have my part 2. Okay, wait for my part 2. Okay? See you later.